Hello everyone, it's Annie and I'm here today finally with my November wrap up. So I read 15 books in November and my average rating was a 4.3, which is really good. I had so many 5 stars in November. It was, of course, nonfiction November, so I read a lot of memoirs and nonfiction, and I also read a lot of Native authors for Native American Heritage Month in the United States. So let's just say this was an amazing reading month, as November usually is for me. All right, I have a ton of books to show you. So many. So definitely stay tuned. As always, the worst books will be in the beginning and the last book will be my favorite book of the month. So let's go. Okay, so I say my worst books, but the lowest rated books that I had this month were rated 3 stars, so I still liked them. But I'd have to say probably my least favorite book of this month was The Navigating Fox by Christopher Rowe. This is a Tor novella, which I usually love, but this just didn't really do much for me. It was about a fox named Quintus Schuall, who is the world's only talking fox, and he is in disgrace after guiding an expedition to its doom, leaving no survivors. 1 year later, he's offered the chance to redeem himself if he leads a motley fractious team, both human and animal, all the way to the gates of hell. So this is like a fable. The world building was quite interesting. There were these animals that were able to talk and they were like highly revered, and then there are normal animals that can't talk, and then there are also humans. It was an interesting world, kind of seemed inspired by ancient Rome a little bit, and the world building was good, but the story just didn't really keep my interest. There is this little mystery about where this fox came from, because he is the only talking and navigating fox that exists. And it kind of seemed like it was setting up for a sequel or even a series, which I don't know if that's true. But I would have liked to see a little bit more from this book. I know it's a novella, so, you know, that happens sometimes with novellas. But yeah, I think I would have liked a little bit more explanation, because I felt a little bit lost sometimes in the story. But the cover is really pretty. And yeah, the world building was definitely good. All right, the next and last 3-star, is Venko by Sherry DeMaline. This is my 3rd book by Sherry DeMaline. I read their first YA horror, which I can't remember the name of, and then I read their more recent release, The Secret Garden retelling. And I liked that one. The first horror book that I read, I didn't really like that one so much. This one was also kind of middle of the road for me. This is about a girl who is living with her grandmother. She's a millennial and she is living in a tiny apartment in Toronto, waiting for something to happen to her. And one night she burrows into an old passageway and finds a tarnished silver spoon etched with a witch and the word Salem. So that sounds interesting. I'm gonna be honest, I don't even really remember the plot of this book, which is a little bit of a problem. I remember that it was a feminist fantasy, a contemporary fantasy. This spoon that she finds connects her to a network of witches who work for this front company named Venko. Cool. And yeah, they're kind of like this society of witches in modern times, which is very cool. But as the spoons all fall into place, a powerful adversary is stalking their every move. Jay Christos, a roguish and deadly witch hunter as old as witchcraft itself, has them in his sights. So the story, the plot, now I remember, is that the main character and her grandmother have to find the next and last spoon. So these spoons lead them to the next witch, and they need to find each spoon and each witch before the apocalypse happens in order to stop it. And it was kind of obvious who the last witch was, to be honest, from very early on. even though I think it was meant to be a surprise reveal. It was quite obvious, and the villain, that J. Christos guy, he was not very compelling. He was quite one-dimensional, and I don't know, it just didn't work for me so much, but I know a lot of people did like it. So if you're into contemporary fantasy and witches, definitely check this out. All right, now we're on to 4 stars, so we're getting into the good stuff. This is a YA or adult, I'm not sure actually, fantasy. It is To Shape a Dragon's Breath. All right, this is a native fantasy about a girl who goes to this colonizer-run dragon riding school, and she is basically one of the only native people in the school, and that causes a lot of problems for her. She was from the remote island of Muskopag, which has not seen a dragon in many generations until the main character finds a dragon's egg and bonds with its hatchling. Her people are delighted, remembering the days when dragons lived among them and danced away the storms of autumn, enabling the people to thrive. So the main character becomes an Nepeshuesit, a person with a unique relationship with a dragon in their culture. But unfortunately for her, the colonizers of her land have different opinions. They have a very specific idea of how a dragon should be raised, and the main character doesn't agree with any of those ideas. So she's basically forced to go to school away from her family, away from her culture, onto the mainland, and she has a lot of problems assimilating, and she gets into a lot of trouble that is not her fault because of racism and things like that. And this was a really, really amazing book. I loved it. I know it's going to be part of a trilogy, I think, or at least it's going to be a series. And I probably will pick up the next one. I really liked it. It's also queer and perhaps poly as well. Yeah, so I really enjoyed this. It was really refreshing. I just wish there had been a little bit more of the actual dragons, because the book focused very heavily on like the world building, which was amazing, and showing the difference between the two societies, and the main character's difficulties within those societies, which was very, very well done. But I do wish there were a little bit more about the dragons themselves, because that's, you know, I love dragons, so I wanted to know a little bit more, but hopefully in the next books we will get that. All right, now we have 2 nonfiction books that I rated 4 stars. This is How Far the Light Reaches by Sabrina Imbler, and this is a queer memoir, although on the Goodreads Choice Awards it wasn't in the memoir category. This is a series of essays, each about a different sea creature, which was really interesting. And each sea creature's life and story is compared to the author's story, or like parts of their life. And it was a very interesting way to tell a story. I really liked it. It was a 4 because, I don't know, it was a 4. I don't know, it wasn't a 5 for me. Yeah, so they're a queer mixed-race writer, and they have always been drawn to the mystery of life in the sea. So each essay in this debut collection profiles one such sea creature. The mother octopus who starves herself while watching over her eggs, the Chinese sturgeon whose migration route has been decimated by pollution and dams, the bizarre bobbit worm, and other uncanny creatures lurking in the deep ocean. So if you're looking for a queer memoir, if you're interested in sea creatures and marine biology, this is definitely a good one to pick up. Yeah, I liked it. I enjoyed it, and I did vote for it in the Goodreads Choice Awards, but sadly it didn't win. Another nonfiction that I rated 4 stars is Ice by Amy Brady. I'm gonna be honest, this was a cover read. Okay, the cover is so striking. I love the color and the font and everything. So this is literally about ice and humans' relationship to it, and basically our taming of ice, I guess you can say it. So it's From Mixed Drinks to Skating Rings, A Cool History of a Hot Commodity. So it follows humans basically creating ice and being able to freeze things and what we do with it, and also the climate conditions because we do that. And it's quite interesting. It's got a little boring in some parts, so that's why it's a 4 out of 5. But cool history, you know, it's just an interesting little micro history book. It was fun. All right, The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters is another native fiction book, and it was really, really good. This was a really anticipated release for me, so a little disappointed it's only 4 stars, but it was really well done, very, very well done. My mom read it and she loved it. It was really, really good. This is a historical mystery book. It is set, well, it starts in 1962. Following a Mi'kmaq family from Nova Scotia who travels to Maine every summer to pick blueberries in the field. But a few weeks into the season, their youngest child, Ruthie, who's 4 years old, vanishes. And she was last seen by her 6-year-old brother, Joe. And that fact really haunts him for the rest of his life. And so there's that timeline. And then there's Norma, who we follow. She's a young girl who grows up in Maine, and she's raised in a wealthy white household, but she's plagued by dreams that she doesn't understand, and her controlling mother refuses to discuss them with her. So the mystery there is quite obvious who Norma is, and it follows her journey, and it follows both her and Joe's, her brother's, point of view. And it is very sad. I will say there's not a lot of breathing room in this book. It is very, very, very sad. Like, there is just one punch after the other. It's tragic. But it was gorgeous. For fans of The Vanishing Half and Woman of Light is what it says, and I agree with that. So she's troubled by these recurring dreams and visions. As she grows older, Norma slowly comes to realize there's something her parents aren't telling her, and then she tries to uncover this family secret. And that's the book. It is very well done, and I will definitely be picking up more from Amanda Peters in the coming years. This was her debut. It was very, very impressive. All right, the last couple 4 stars were part of a series. It is the 2nd and 3rd series of the Bloodright trilogy, Oaths of Legacy and Vows of Empire. So I did read the first book last month, loved it, gave it 5 stars. These books were 2 stars. It was a good sci-fi series. It was a good space opera. It was queer, but it's not really a romance. It's more of a political space opera, which I tend to like. But my complaint with it is that I wish this were adult, and I wish they were longer. The books, I don't have them physically, but the books are quite short. They're like under 300 pages or something, and they're quite little, and they are YA, and if they hadn't been YA, this book series could have been so much darker and so much more interesting, because there's a lot of little tidbits of world building and politics that were not explored thoroughly enough for me, and I just felt like I wanted more from it. But I feel like the author was either told to cut it out or just to gloss over it because of its YA standing. So that's why I am rating them a 4 and not a 5. I'm not telling you anything about them if you didn't read the first book. Okay, so check out my video, my October wrap-up for the first book and my thoughts on it. But yeah, I liked them enough. I'm glad I read the whole series, but yeah, these were just 4 stars for me. All right, now we're into the 5 stars. There are so many. This is the first book I want to highlight. It's called Thinning Blood, a memoir of family myth and identity by Leah Myers. It is a very tiny book, but it really packed a punch, I have to say. This is about Leah Myers, who may be the last member of the Jamestown S'Klallam tribe in her family line due to her tribe's strict blood quantum laws. In her memoir, Myers excavates the stories of 4 generations of women in order to leave a record of her family. Beginning with her great-grandmother, the last full-blooded Native member in their lineage, she connects each woman with her totem to construct her family's totem pole: protective bear, defiant salmon, compassionate hummingbird, and on top, the raven, which is on the cover. As she pieces together their stories, Myers weaves in tribal folktales, the history of the Native genocide, and Native mythology. She tells this larger story of how, as she puts it, her culture is being bleached out, offering sharp vignettes of her own life between white and native worlds. Her naive childhood love for Pocahontas, her struggles with the Klallam language, the violence she faced at the hands of a close white friend as a teenager, and more. So she has, I believe, 1/8 blood, and that is the last, that is like the lowest blood quantum level you can have in order to be an enrolled member of her tribe. And she, during this story, it's just really sad, for a lot of reasons, but she continually says, like, unless she decides to marry and have a child with one of the, I think, like 200 members left of the tribe, then her children won't be enrolled. And there are so many issues that come with that, because enrolled members of the tribe do get, you know, stipends, and she's seen people's lives who were raised native but were not native enough blood quantum level wise. Their lives just did not go well because of that. And it was just a very, very hard-hitting, very sad memoir, and it definitely needs more hype, because I haven't really seen it around, and I really think that more people should read this, because it really it shows the modern consequences that are still going on of the Native genocide in the United States and Canada. So absolutely read this book. And next we have another little Indigenous book. This is Tahoe, which is a book that I have been meaning to read for so long. It originally caught my eye because of the fish on the cover, and it blew me away. This book was absolutely gorgeous. Like, please pick this up, please read it. It really, really deserves more hype. This book was absolutely gorgeous. It's a collection of short stories and some poetry in there as well. It is sublime. It's just amazing. Alicia Elliott, who I'm going to talk about in a little bit, blurbed it. She said, "The stories in this collection move like the waves of the ocean that divide Vancouver Island and Aotearoa. Once you emerge from Tahoe's narrative depths, you'll miss its imagination, its rhythms, and its heart," which is 100% true. So it is an exploration of Indigenous families, womanhood, and alternate post-colonial realities. The author is of Maori and Coast Salish descent, so throughout this novel, it envisions a shared past between the two cultures, and it is set in a reimagined version of Vancouver Island and Aotearoa, New Zealand, that sits side by side in the ocean in this book. So even though in real life they are very far away from each other, the author brings their two cultures together, and it's just absolutely beautiful. Yeah, it says each chapter is a fable, an autobiographical memory, or a poem. For example, we have a monster guarding cultural objects in a museum, a woman uncovering her own grave, another woman remembers her estranged father. On rainforest beaches and grassy dunes, sisters and cousins contend with the ghosts of the past, all the way back to when the first foreign ships arrived on their shores. It is just absolutely beautiful. If you're into Indigenous literature, please read this. I should not have waited so long to read this. It is absolutely stunning, and more people need to read it. It's just amazing. And then we have another sequel, which is Dark Air by C.S. Pachat. This is the sequel to Dark Rise, which was so good. Dark Air just came out. Again, it's a sequel, but I gave it 5 stars. It's so good. I actually gave Dark Rise 4 stars. Dark Air was better. It was just amazing. Pachat is so good at slow burn romances, okay? And yeah, I can't really say anything about this because it would be a massive spoiler for the first book. So if you want to hear my thoughts on the first book, check out my October wrap-up again. But Dark Air is amazing, and I can't believe I'm gonna have to wait a long time for the third book. I really need it. Even though this is YA, it was dark, it was gritty, it was amazing, and honestly, it's YA on a technicality. Like, it doesn't feel YA at all. It is just absolutely amazing. I loved it. I'm in like my dark fantasy era, I think. I'm loving it. So absolutely check out this series if you haven't yet. So next, we have Same Bed, Different Dreams by Ed Park. This book is gonna be really hard to talk about. It was definitely 5 stars, but it was dizzying and just a little confusing, or a lot confusing throughout it until the very end, I have to admit. But it was amazing. If you're at all interested in Korean history, you have to pick this book up. It's just crazy. So in 1919, far-flung patriots established the Korean Provisional Government to protest the Japanese occupation. This government in exile proves mostly symbolic, though, and after Japan's defeat in World War II, the KPG dissolves and civil war erupts, resulting in the tragic North-South split that remains today. Yeah, that's a very, very Reader's Digest version of the history. But what if the KPG still existed, now working towards a unified Korea, secretly pulling levers to further its aims? Same Bed, Different Dreams weaves together 3 distinct narrative voices with an archive of mysterious images and twists reality like a kaleidoscope. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. So it weaves together Korean history, American pop culture, and our tech-fraught lives come together. It's loaded with assassins and mad poets, RPGs and slasher films, K-pop bands, and the perils of social media. So we first get introduced to the main character. His name is Soon Shin, who's a former writer now employed by the tech behemoth called Gloat. And he comes into possession of an unfinished book seemingly authored by the KPG. The manuscript is a riveting revisionist history, connecting famous names and obscure bit players to the KPG's grand project. Everyone from Syngman Rhee, the architect poet Yi Sung, to Jack London and Marilyn Monroe. MASH is in there too, as are the Moonies, and a history of violence extending from the assassination of President McKinley to the Reagan-era downing of a passenger plane that puts the world on the brink of war. So, if you're confused about that, I was too. But trust me when I say that this really, really weaves it all together, okay? It's a blend of historical fiction, thriller, sci-fi, alternate reality. It's amazing. And I loved all the characters in it. They all came together at the end in such a satisfying way. I really love when books have seemingly disconnected storylines within it, and you're like, well, how do these go together? And then the author is a genius, and at the end, they all go together so well. It was a masterpiece, if I dare say. I will absolutely pick up by Ed Park in the future. I had never heard of him before, and I will absolutely pick up from him again, because this book must have been so difficult to write, and it was a masterpiece. I was enthralled throughout listening through the whole thing. And please don't miss this. It was amazing. Really, really amazing. Another amazing 5-star essay collection is Thunder Song. And this book I got from NetGalley, so it's not out yet. It will be out March 5th next year. But absolutely pre-order it and, request it from your library. This is not to be missed. This collection is simply stunning. So it is a collection of essays by Sacha Lapointe, with a collection of essays about what it means to be a proudly queer Indigenous woman in America today. It draws on a rich family archive as well as the anthropological work of her late great-grandmother. The author explores themes ranging from Indigenous identity and stereotypes to cultural displacement and environmental degradation to understand what our experiences teach us about the power of community, commitment, and conscientious honesty. Unapologetically punk, the essays in Thunder Song segue between the miraculous and the mundane, the spiritual and the physical, as they examine the role of art, in particular music, and community in helping a new generation of Indigenous people claim the strength of their heritage while defining their own path in the contemporary world. This was really not a collection to miss. It is so good. In my review, I said that I devoured this essay collection. I literally downloaded it from NetGalley and finished it the same day. Like, I couldn't stop reading it. I just got sucked into it. I couldn't stop reading it. And I really, really loved the very well done way that the author weaved in her great-grandmother's life and stories into her own life and stories. It's just really, really amazing. One of the essays that stood out to me was about the author becoming vegan and her kind of journey with that, and realizing that veganism is a privilege, and that she needed to make space for herself and her own cultural allowances for herself to be able to eat her cultural and indigenous foods, such as salmon, which is a very important part of Coast Salish culture. She makes a lot of great points in all of her essays, but that one really stood out to me for some reason. That one, it really stuck in my mind. Her descriptions are extremely vivid, and she is a really great native writer that I think has a lot of potential. And I know they also wrote a lot of other books. Oh no, they wrote another memoir called Red Paint, and also a poetry collection called Rose Quartz, which I may pick up after this. I didn't know about that. So absolutely, highly, highly recommend Thunder Song. It is 5 stars all around. All right, so I can't choose my favorite book, but I have one fiction and one nonfiction. So they're in different categories altogether, so I'm gonna say they're both my favorites. First, we have The Race to Be Myself by Caster Semenya. And if you don't know who she is a world champion runner who won Olympic medals in the 800-meter race. And she is from South Africa. She is a very famous, very impressive athlete, runner. But unfortunately, she was born with a condition that she has too much testosterone, or testosterone that is above the normal level for what we consider female. And because of that, she was banned from running in official sports events. And this book tells her story about how she fought that ruling, and how other girls who have the same condition have also fought that ruling. And it doesn't just touch on, the legal proceedings and stuff with this ban that she was put under. It also deals with her personal life. We see her growing up in her village as a child and how she became the person she is today. And also as she grows up, meets her wife that she's now married to with children. And it was just a beautiful memoir. I didn't really know anything about her except, I knew her name from the news stories that had come out years ago about her. And she's just really inspiring, and she doesn't take any crap at all. She is really inspiring. So I really personally am interested in athletic memoirs, but sometimes, I think it was actually earlier this year in January, I read Nathan Chen's memoir, who's a figure skater, and it felt very surface level. Granted, he's much younger than her, so she has more to say, but it was very surface level. But this book really is, I think, what a memoir should be. It really dives in, and it gives you her feelings and her thoughts, and she's not shy about any of it. And I absolutely loved it. It was a surprise 5-star read for me. It was amazing, and I have been thinking about it since I read it, and I will continue to think about it for a long, long time. All right, so my favorite fiction book of the month is And Then She Fell by Alicia Elliott. I read Alicia Elliott's memoir, which was titled A Mind Spread Out on the Ground, which was stunning and one of my favorite nonfiction books I've ever read. This is a masterpiece again. It did feel very personal to Alicia Elliott, and I saw another reviewer say that this book was definitely written exactly how the author must have needed it to be written, and it felt very personal. So it follows Alice, who on the surface is exactly where she thinks she should be. She's just given birth to a beautiful baby girl, Dawn. Her husband, Steve, a white academic whose area of study is conveniently her own Mohawk culture, is nothing but supportive, and they've moved into a new home in a posh Toronto neighborhood. But Alice could not feel like more of an imposter. She isn't connecting with her daughter, a struggle made even more difficult by the recent loss of her own mother. And every waking moment is spent hiding her despair from Steve and their ever-watchful neighbors, among whom she's the sole Indigenous resident. Even when she does have a minute to herself, her perpetual self-doubt hinders the one vestige of her old life she has left. her goal of writing a modern retelling of the Haudenosaunee creation story. Then, as if all that wasn't enough, strange things start to happen. She finds herself losing bits of time and hearing voices she can't explain, all while her neighbor's passive-aggressive behavior begins to morph into something far more threatening. Though Steve assures her this is all in her head, Alice cannot fight the feeling that something is very, very wrong, and that in her creation story lies the key to her and Dawn's survival. She just has to finish it before it's too late. There's so much to talk about in this book. First of all, it is a book about postpartum depression and psychosis, which is something that for some reason I'm really interested in, even though I have no desire to have a child. But it is something I'm very interested in. So that was a draw for me, and it was just done so well. There are some really disturbing parts of this story. I mean, there are a lot of disturbing parts of the story. It is a horror, okay? So if you're squeamish, maybe think twice about it. But it just builds and builds and builds. It starts out where she's like, oh, you know, that's just a thought that, like, I'm just doubting myself, it's fine, or I'm just being paranoid, it's fine. And then it just builds and builds and builds, and you're on the edge of your seat the entire time, waiting to see what she's going to do and what's real and what isn't, because Alicia Elliott is really, really good at making you feel like you don't know what's real and what isn't. Alice is an unreliable narrator, but you really sympathize with her. Steve, her husband, is just gross. Yeah, there's so much I could say about this. There's some really disturbing parts where, for one thing, she gets locked out of her house by mistake with her baby daughter, and her neighbors come by and they're like, who are you? Like, we've never seen you here before. This is after they just moved in. And she's like, this is my house, like, I live here. And they don't believe her, and they threaten to call the police on her because she's Native. And it was so disturbing, and things like this happen, and it was really scary to read about from Alice's perspective. There's a part where the character of Pocahontas in the Disney animated movie kind of comes alive and starts talking to Alice, and that's kind of a thread that goes through the whole story. She kind of shows up every now and then. The ending was like wild. It was absolutely wild. This is a horror, contemporary social horror, but also supernatural horror. Psychological, sci-fi a little bit at the end. There's like time stuff going on, time travel stuff. It was just masterfully done. An absolute masterpiece, and I'm not saying that lightly. Alicia Elliott is one of my favorite authors. She has absolutely solidified herself in that spot for me after this book. I will read anything she writes after this. And again, as I said, her nonfiction book is also not to be missed. This is one of my favorite books of the year, absolutely. It's going to be on that list, so absolutely check it out. All right, so thank you so much for watching my November wrap-up. Sorry it was late, I was sick again, so thank you so much for watching. Such a great reading month. Let me know down below what your favorite books of November was. And I will join you again with my end of the year videos with my best books, worst books of the year, my reading stats, my Sapphic tier ranking of the year. I'm so excited for all my end of the year videos and for what 2024 may bring. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe for more bookish videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye!